Hello, everybody. My name is Mariusz Skrobała. Welcome to my YouTube channel, CONSERVATIO. And today, joining me from United States, my favorite American journalist, Alex Newman. Hello, Alex.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's a great pleasure to have you here once more after 1 year. We did a video some time ago. Alex, we had a terrible accident lately in the last few days in Europe. A young patriotic man in France named Quentin was killed by far-left Antifa mob in the broad daylight on the street. You had a very similar case, even of much more bigger profile. I'm talking about the great Charlie Kirk, who was assassinated last year in United States. I think you had the pleasure to meet him and know him personally. Can you tell us at the beginning what kind of person was he?
Charlie Kirk was a great man, and what you see on the screen, what you see in his YouTube videos, is how he was backstage and in the green room and behind the scenes. He was very genuine. He was a very loving guy. I first met him some years ago when he and I both spoke at an event for the Republican Party up in Illinois. And really enjoyed my time with him there. We had Antifa protesters actually outside, shrieking with the purple hair and yelling. And we tried to talk to them. Charlie Kirk was very cordial with them and respectful with them. Eventually, the police had to be called. But that's the kind of guy he was. And after we got to know each other a little bit, I was invited to speak at several of his big events, especially focusing on education. His organization bought hundreds of copies of my book and gave it to everybody who was in education, teachers, homeschool moms, school board members. And I had the honor of bringing him on my show and speaking with him. And he saw the world very much as I do. I asked him on my last interview with him, what he thought was the nature of the problem, and he explained that he thought it was demonic. And I asked him what the solution was, and he said we have to get our children protected from this indoctrination by the government schools. So I think we both saw eye to eye when it came to the problem. He was definitely a man of God. The media tries to paint him as just some political activist. He was not just a political activist, much more than that. He was interested in the gospel and in the Great Commission. Jesus commanded us to make disciples of all nations, to baptize them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and to teach them to obey all that God has commanded us. And so that's what Charlie Kirk was doing. He was going on to college campuses and explaining to these young people who'd been very brainwashed, very confused by their education, what the Bible says about marriage, about sex, about gender, about abortion, about politics, about borders. And I think that is why the radical left and the demonic forces hated him so much that they had to kill him.
You said something about the young children. Please tell me what's happening to the young generation in the West, because it's not the only case like that. I remember that some time ago you used the term satanic indoctrination camps in order to describe the government organized led public education. Do you think that the roots of this evil are in it?
There's no question about it. I know that for sure. In fact, my latest book, Woke and Weaponized, that I wrote with Robert Bortons, the CEO of Classical Conversations, is the biggest homeschool program in the world. Our very first chapter starts off with an introduction to the man who first came up with the idea that the government should be educating children. And this is a guy who hated Christianity. He hated marriage. He hated family. He hated private property. He was kind of like Karl Marx before Karl Marx came along. He was talking to spirits. He thought he was talking to dead people, which the Bible condemns. And he viewed government takeover of education as the means to prepare people for this new utopian society that he envisioned. So it's a very dangerous institution. It's been very dangerous from the very beginning. And if you look back, this is also Karl Marx's idea that the government should educate all children in tax-funded and government-controlled schools. So we now have a problem in the West that has taken deep root in all of our countries, where we have surrendered our duty to educate our children to the government. In some places it's less bad than others. I know in Poland, your government has declared that Jesus is king, and I think that's a wonderful development. But that is not true in most of the West. We're doing everything possible to get Jesus out of everything, to get God out of everything. And we're reaping what we have sown, right? We're watching now our young people. They're so confused. They don't even know which bathroom to go into. They're identifying as cats. They think they can chop off their private parts and be a new gender. I mean, even 10 years ago, this stuff would have been considered completely and totally crazy. Like you get put into an insane asylum for this kind of stuff. Now, if you disagree with it, you're being called a hater, a hate group, a homophobe, transphobe, whatever. And this is all because of the indoctrination that's happening in the public schools. It's the big problem that if we don't address, if we don't deal with it, we're going to lose everything.
From what I know, the first public school system was introduced in 18th century in Prussia,
Yep.
and the aim was, in fact, that people will worship the state, not God and family. And then we have a huge problem in the modern West because the political left, in fact, is in charge of our countries. And if there is a government public education, the left takes over the state. And at the same time, it takes over the whole system of education, and it's promoting its ideology and the sick values that it represents.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's exactly right. And the system that took root in Prussia was actually based on the ideas of Robert Owen. It's a fascinating story that we describe in the book. He had written these essays about why government should take over education, and he describes in his autobiography how these essays were obtained by the ambassador from Prussia, a man by the name of Baron Jacobi, who took them back to Prussia. And then the dictator of Prussia liked the ideas so much that he ordered his interior minister to start implementing them for Prussia. And from Prussia, then it spread back to the United States through Massachusetts through a guy called Horace Mann. And you're exactly right. The leftist and communist and globalist forces have really taken over government in most of the countries of the West. We have some little reprieves. I think Viktor Orban is resisting this in Hungary. We have Donald Trump trying to resist this in the United States. But by and large, throughout the Western world, governments have now fallen under the control of people who hate our heritage, people who hate the Christian foundations of our society. And they understand that they may not be able to force us to surrender, but they understand that if they can indoctrinate the next generation, just like Adolf Hitler understood, right? If you capture the hearts and minds of the next generation, it doesn't matter what the older people think. They're going to die. They're going to pass on. The next generation will be ready for taking down the old system and bringing in a new one. And that's what we're watching throughout the Western world right now. It's critical. And that's what Charlie Kirk was remedying, right? He was going onto college campuses and dealing with millions of these indoctrinated young people, and he found a way to really reach them. It's something that a lot of people have been working on for a long time is how do we get back our young people now that they've been so indoctrinated, now that they don't know how to read, they don't know how to write, they don't know how to do math. How do we bring them back to sanity and to common sense values and biblical traditions? And Charlie Kirk figured out a formula that worked, not for everybody, but he was getting a lot of young people to recognize that they had been indoctrinated, that there was incredible value in our history, in our traditions, in our heritage. And that's why I think he was such a threat, because he figured out how to override that indoctrination, at least in a big percentage of the population. And a lot of them were going to be future leaders, politicians, CEOs, cultural leaders. So I think that's why Charlie Kirk represented such a major threat to this movement.
Will you agree with me if I say that totalitarian states hate religion because it's a threat for the worship of the state? And the best example in the modern world is, of course, China. They destroyed Tibet. Dalai Lama is forced to live in India. They were fighting against the Falun Gong sect. A lot of members of it are in United States. They have their own media, their Epoch Times. I know you were working with them also. And also they are persecuting Catholics in China, because in China you are forced to obey and worship the state and the Communist Party of China, of course, not God.
Yeah, and that is something that we see with a lot of brands of totalitarians is that they hate religion because it is a loyalty that people have that's above their loyalty to the state. And if you want the state to be God and father and mother and brother and church and everything else, to abolish all loyalties other than the loyalty to the state. Religion is, of course, a very significant force in competition with that. But I would go even a step further, and I would argue that totalitarians hate true religion. As long as people are worshiping a false deity, right? One of the things that we're seeing right now that the totalitarians are bringing back is paganism. I was just at the UN COP30 in the Amazon rainforest, and one of the things that became very obvious to me is that the paganism of previous centuries that was suppressed as the gospel spread through Europe, that was suppressed as the gospel spread through the Americas, is being deliberately brought back by the United Nations. So they started a lot of their sessions with prayers to Mother Earth and river gods and tree gods and rock gods and things like this. And that's because I think pagan values are much more they make a person much more susceptible to tyranny. If you look back at the history of the world, tyranny has basically been the norm throughout most of human history. Liberty and limited government, that's a unique idea that comes from the Christian worldview that didn't exist apart from the Christian worldview. And so if you can get people back to pagan values, back to polygamy and orgies and worshiping creation rather than the creator, or worshiping the state, right, as Hegel, the German philosopher, advocated, then it becomes much easier to rule people and enslave people. So true religion is hated by the totalitarians and by all those who want to subvert Christian civilization. But I'm thankful that we're seeing what I consider to be maybe even the beginning stages of a revival. I know we're seeing some of it in Europe. I know we're seeing some here in the United States. Now we have to see where this is going to go. But I'm noticing a lot of young people now in Europe and in the United States returning back to their roots. What are we missing in church? And so I'm grateful that we're starting to see some serious resistance to this effort to eradicate true religion.
Alex, media all over the world were writing about this terrible thing that happened in Utah to Charlie Kirk. And one article is very interesting for me. It was published in Chronicles magazine, and the title was "The Internet and the Left Killed Charlie Kirk." And please allow me to read a part of it. The author name is uh, August Maillard. Oh, sorry. Sorry, it's another one. The right must crush the left before it is too late. And the author is Edward Welsh. The American right has tried talking with the left. The left has responded with violence. And the author's ends with, it is only in America that the right still has a chance to defeat the left. Western European societies are hopelessly controlled by the totalitarian left and provide a glimpse of what will happen in America if the left is not defeated here. And as a European, as I must tell you, it's true. The totalitarian left rules in Europe. Maybe we don't have an open totalitarianism with gulags yet, at least, but censorship is terrible. And if you look at our governments in Europe, it's 95%, in fact, of far left members, yes? Do you think that
Yeah.
this ideology is being spread by the political left of hate, division, and fight against the right wing and religious values is also responsible for what happened to Charlie Kirk?
There's no question in my mind that these ideas are intimately involved with creating the climate that allowed Charlie Kirk to be murdered. I don't know that we're being told the truth yet by the government about his assassination. I've got some very serious questions. I don't know what happened, but there are some holes in the story that make me wonder what's happened here. But there's no question that Europe is now almost too far gone. And I know Europe very well. I've spent many years living in different European countries. I've lived in Sweden, I've lived in France, I've lived in Switzerland, I've even lived in Spain for some time. So I've had a close relationship with Europe. In fact, my wife is from Europe, and so I come back regularly. And there's no question that Europe is now almost entirely under the control of totalitarians. And that may not be true in every single country, but when you look at the European Union and its institutions, which now have basically all the power over the European nations, the formerly sovereign European nations, it's entirely dominated by totalitarians. There's a few decent members in the European Parliament, but even the European Parliament is not a genuine parliament in the sense that we've understood in the West for centuries. So in Europe, we have a very big problem, and I think absent some sort of revival, some sort of miraculous intervention by God, it's going to be very difficult to throw off the shackles of tyranny that are being forged right now. In the United States, we do have a better opportunity to do that, I think, but we're also in a very dangerous situation. I think the murder of Charlie Kirk was a symptom of that, and I think what they did to Charlie Kirk, they would like to do to all of us if they could. They may not have the power to do that yet, partly because of the very clever system of government that our forefathers designed for us, where power is separated into different branches where power is shared between the state and the federal and the local government. And we have boundaries that cannot be crossed, where we have in our foundational documents that God gave us our rights. And of course, this has been ingrained in us for centuries that God gave us rights, and the government, because they didn't give us the rights, doesn't have the right to take them away. So it's more difficult to enslave Americans, but we're very far down that path as well. I'm concerned that we're on the verge of a revolution here, not in a good sense, in a bad sense, and because they have controlled education for so long. They have a lot of young foot soldiers who don't know any better, who are ready to become cannon fodder for this revolution. So we have a long struggle ahead of us. It's not going to be easy. We don't know how it will turn out. The results are in God's hands, of course, and so we have confidence that God has a perfect plan. But no, we don't want to sugarcoat it. The situation is not good either for Europe or for the United States, and I think we will see many more Charlie Kirks murdered before this is all over.
Yes, Alex, to give a conclusion of our talk, the left started around 200 years ago with the French Revolution when they killed the French king. Later, we had Karl Marx, we had Bolshevik Revolution, we had USSR, we had the Mao China, we had the Rook Khmers in Cambodia. Yeah? Do you think what happened in Utah, and it's still going on around us everywhere, it's another phase of a war between the right and the left, and on different level between God and his enemies?
Yes, there's no question. The communist movement is deeply involved in this, and it has a nexus with communist China and with the Kremlin and with a lot of communist forces, including here in the United States. But when you get higher up, the people who are behind the scenes promoting communism are not really communists themselves. I mean, these are some of the most powerful and wealthy individuals in the world. They certainly don't intend to give up their wealth for the benefit of the proletariat. That's just a smokescreen for a criminal cabal that wants to take away our freedom. And ultimately, I do think it needs to be seen in spiritual terms. This is a battle between good and evil. The Apostle Paul describes it well in his letter to the church at Ephesus in chapter 6. He says, "We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." Paul also describes Satan as the god of this world. In First John, we see in chapter 5, it's described as the world being in the hands of the evil one. And so we must be clear. There is a spiritual component to this battle. We have an enemy. That enemy is Satan. Satan has legions of demons. But we must also remember that Satan is not, God. Satan is not sovereign. Satan is a created being. His end is in the lake of fire, as the scriptures teach us. And he's already been defeated by Jesus Christ at the cross. So I don't know what the future holds, but I know that we can trust God and have 100% confidence in his plan. And I also know that he's given us very clear instructions about what we are to be doing. And as Christians, that's where we should be looking for our answers.
Alex, thank you very much for this incredibly interesting talk. It was a great pleasure to have you here once more. Thank you.
It's an honor and a pleasure. Thank you, sir, for having me.